From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to U.S. Farm Report this weekend. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. Deal or no deal, an update on trade talks with China. USDA hits the market with a look at supply and demand, but what are the markets really watching right now?
The major takeaway, of course, is that it still is going to boil down to the weather forecast in July.
An immigration raid at a meat plant in Omaha shakes up the cattle markets, but cash trade continues to be on fire. And a legacy worth leaving behind.
And I always tell them that the biggest legacy that you will leave the family is the legacy of transition planning.
The keys to setting up the next generation for success in succession planning. Now for the news, we begin with the latest on the situation with China. The U.S. announcing a framework trade deal between the U.S. and Beijing. The announcement came at the end of 2 days of talks in London that wrapped up late Tuesday. President Trump taking to his Truth Social site to make the announcement, saying, quote, "Our deal with China is done, subject to final approval with President Xi and me," end quote. Under the current plan, President Trump says the U.S. will get magnets and rare earth minerals, along with Chinese goods having a tariff total of 55% placed on them. In return, though, the U.S. will allow Chinese students to attend American colleges and universities and will have a 10% tariff on U.S. goods. China's top trade negotiator said, quote, "We hope that the progress we made will be conducive to increasing trust," end quote. President Trump calling the relationship with China excellent. And big news on the biofuels front on Friday. The Trump administration is now proposing oil refiners blend more biofuels domestically to help crimp imported supplies. It's all through EPA finally releasing the proposed renewable volume obligations, or RVOs. EPA not changing much on the ethanol front, but big changes to biomass diesel, which includes biodiesel and renewable diesel. For 2026, biomass diesel production mandate is proposed at 7.1 RINs, which is 5.61 billion gallons. And for 2027, the proposal is for 5.86 billion gallons. The news sent soybean oil futures limit up on Friday.
We've been looking at 4.4, 4.6 net. Not saying that that's where we're going to end up, but that would be bullish for demand for soy oil and canola oil, domestic feedstocks, if we continue to see limits on foreign feedstocks coming in. And that's what the EPA is recommending. That's what was in the 45Z guidelines that passed the House. Now we're waiting to see if those survive the Senate as well. If they do, then this is bullish for demand for those domestically produced edible oils.
That news sent commodity prices higher. But also Friday, farmers could soon see even higher fertilizer prices. Israel's strike on Iran sent crude oil and fertilizer prices surging on Friday. Iran is the world's #3 urea supplier and the #7 exporter of anhydrous ammonia.
A lot of it also passes through the Strait of Hormuz, which will be at risk going forward. Now, Qatar is the #2 urea producer at 5.2 million metric tons. Saudi Arabia at #6 at 4.2 million metric tons. Oman at #7 at 3.9 million metric tons. This all happened shortly after Ukraine struck one of Russia's biggest fertilizer plants, nitrogen fertilizer plants in Russia here over the past week or so. And also keep in mind that Egypt just curtailed fertilizer production, urea production, because natural gas supplies were cut off coming out of Israel. That's not that uncommon, but the timing is a problem overall.
Suderman says even though we're past peak nitrogen application timing, he urges producers to talk to their fertilizer suppliers about pricing for the upcoming year. And a key ruling will keep President Trump's tariffs in place for now. The U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit has ruled that tariffs imposed using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act can remain in effect while legal proceedings continue. And we're learning more about a raid on a meat production plant in Omaha, Nebraska that happened this week. U.S. Farm Report affiliate KMTV sharing this video with us. Homeland Security calling it the largest worksite enforcement operation in the state during the Trump presidency. The raid happening at a plant of Glen Valley Foods. Republican U.S. Congressman Don Bacon told local media 75 to 80 people were detained. The food packaging company said it was surprised by the raid and had followed the rules regarding immigration status. Chad Hartman, the president of Glen Valley Foods in Omaha, said the plant that was raided used E-Verify. That's a federal database used for checking employees' immigration status. Hartman said federal agents had a warrant that said they had identified 107 people who they believed were using fraudulent documents. We have much more about the raid on agweb.com. And immigration officials also continue to visit dairy farms across the country, this time in New Mexico. Immigration and Customs Enforcement sharing this photo, saying it executed a search warrant at Outlook Dairy Farm in Lovington. They say they arrested 11 people for violations of fraud and misuse of visas, permits, and other documents, including 9 that investigators say were already banned from the U.S. The owner of the dairy farm told the Albuquerque Journal that the people arrested supplied him with false paperwork and that following an audit before the raid, he'd been required to fire 24 other workers on the farm. Iowa's governor vetoing a bill this week that would have made it more difficult to put in carbon pipelines across the state. The controversial veto was celebrated by groups like Iowa corn growers, but it disappointed landowners who pushed for the legislation this year. The bill would have required companies like Summit Carbon Solutions to follow a more complex regulatory process to build pipelines. Iowa Republican Governor Kim Reynolds vetoing the bill on Wednesday, saying that it went far beyond the use of eminent domain in the state. With the veto, it now clears the way for Summit Carbon Solutions to continue towards its effort to build a pipeline that will span 2,500 miles across multiple states. It's reported the carbon pipeline will connect to 57 ethanol plants across the Midwest. That's it for the news. Well, heavy rains causing flooding in the plains and even the mid-Mississippi River Valley this week. But will the rest of June be as rainy? A check of weather with BAM Weather next.
U.S. Farm Report is brought to you by Pioneer. Next level yields start with genetics proven to perform. Pioneer. Next level yields start here.